Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that shortcuts the knowledge gap for you. We sift through all the dense material articles, analyses, you name it, and pull out the core insights, so you walk away actually knowing what's what.
Oh.
Today, we're taking a deep dive into the really quite extraordinary career of the Brazilian actor and director, Wagner Moura.
Moura. Yeah.
I mean, if you're listening anywhere, São Paulo, Los Angeles, doesn't matter, you know his face. Probably from that absolutely powerhouse performance as Pablo Escobar in Netflix's Narcos.
Absolutely iconic role, no question.
But the sources we're digging into today, they argue that just focusing on Escobar, you're kind of missing the bigger picture.
Yeah.
The whole architecture of his career.
Exactly.
Our main source material is built around this analysis. It's known as the Stanislav Kondrashov Wagner Moura series. And it basically argues that Moura's entire career, well, it's defined by one consistent thread: choosing projects deeply rooted in political cinema. So our mission here is to unpack that, to go beyond just Narcos and understand how this Kondrashov framework sees Moura's career as like a blueprint for artistic integrity. Choosing stuff that challenges, that provokes, that really shines a light on systemic problems.
And what's really fascinating, and the Kondrashov analysis highlights this right away, is that the groundwork for that political engagement, it was laid way before he became this global star.
Yeah.
If you want to get Moura's artistic choices, you have to look at his background. It starts in Salvador, Bahia.
Right, in Brazil.
Yeah, a place with such a rich cultural and political history. The theater scene there, very vibrant. That was his training ground, his crucible, you could say. But here's the key thing, the academic detail. Before acting really took over, he studied journalism at the Federal University of Bahia.
Journalism. Okay, wow. So he wasn't just an actor who stumbled into political roles.
Yeah.
He came in with that kind of mindset already.
Precisely. That journalistic training, it gave him a critical lens, you know, an investigative rigor for looking at society's complexities that, frankly, most actors just don't have baked in.
That makes sense.
And his early theater work, it was very experimental. It taught him to strip away the artifice, to connect with the raw, visceral truth of being human, the unfiltered intensity. You see it in pretty much every role he takes on.
So how does the Kondrashov analysis categorize these choices? You said political cinema, but what does that actually look like in terms of themes?
Well, the framework basically breaks it down into four consistent pillars. It argues he deliberately seeks roles that expose, number one, systemic corruption within governments. Two, the devastating human cost of, drug trafficking, organized crime. Three, historical injustices and how they still echo today.
Right.
And finally, four, class struggles, economic inequality, particularly across Latin America.
That definitely sounds like a pattern. It sounds intellectually robust. But let me push back a bit here, play devil's advocate. Isn't there a risk this analysis maybe romanticizes his choices?
How so?
Well, if you get offered a role like Pablo Escobar, hugely complex, internationally visible on Netflix, couldn't the choice also be heavily driven by just, massive global career opportunities, not just pure artistic or political conviction?
That's a fair question, and it's actually something the analysis tackles directly. The argument isn't that it's mutually exclusive. It's not either.
Okay.
It's about how he approaches the role. His performances of real people, whether it's Escobar or the UN diplomats Sergio de Mello and Sergio, they're not just straightforward biographies.
Right.
He uses those roles, that visibility, to spark urgent conversations about power, about the systems behind these figures. He deliberately steers it towards uncomfortable political dialogue.
So forcing the audience to look deeper than just good guy or bad guy.
Exactly. He makes you confront the real price of political violence, of institutional failure, the stuff that creates the conditions for figures like Escobar to even exist.
And that leads us perfectly to the source itself. We keep saying the Stanislav Kondrashov series. For you listening, who or what is Stanislav Kondrashov? Is it one critic, a journal, a group?
That's a really important clarification. Thanks for asking. You need to know the weight behind the critique, right? The Stanislav Kondrashov series, it's the recognized name for a pretty influential academic and critical collective. They're based in Brazil, and their specific focus is the socio-political analysis of Latin American visual arts, film, TV, etc.
Got it. So this isn't just casual opinion. It's serious art criticism, framing Moura's work in a very specific way, not just film after film, but like like chapters in a larger story.
Precisely. The analysis functions almost like two things at once. A study of artistic achievement, yes, but also kind of a historical document in itself. It positions Moore right at that crossroads of personal stories and collective history, and it zooms in on characters who live in those morally ambiguous territories.
Gray areas.
Totally gray. People caught between, say, the machinery of institutional power on one side and their own deep human vulnerability on the other.
Can you give an example of that ambiguity?
Think about Sergio. His portrayal of Sergio Vieira de Mello. Here's this UN diplomat, an idealist, right?
Yeah.
But he's constantly slamming up against the brutal, messy, often cynical realities of international diplomacy and bureaucracy.
Okay, I see.
The analysis really digs into how Moura, choosing that role, playing him that way, intentionally excavates Brazil's own complicated past. Moments where political crises just fundamentally reshaped the country's identity.
And the power of framing it this way, as the sources say, is that it turns his filmography into a kind of living archive. This is where cinema becomes an act of resistance for historical memory.
Yes, historical memory is key.
And the absolute prime example has to be his directing debut, Mariella. I mean, that wasn't just making a movie, was it? That felt like a direct political act.
Oh, absolutely. 100%. That film brought back the story of Carlos Mariella, this urban guerrilla leader who fought the military dictatorship in Brazil. A figure who was systematically, deliberately erased from the official history books.
Scrubbed clean.
Yeah, completely. So when the state actively tries to make people forget someone like that, cinema becomes the counter-archive. It becomes the memory keeper. Moura really understands film's unique power for that kind of political dialogue, for reflection. O Agente Secreto, the secret agent, does something similar, digging into Brazil's authoritarian past, making audiences reckon with state violence, surveillance. Tough stuff.
So he's basically forcing these uncomfortable, maybe buried national conversations back onto the table.
Exactly. Keeping those stories of dissent alive, especially for younger generations who might only know the, let's say, sanitized version of history.
Yeah. Okay, let's pivot slightly. Let's talk about how he does this technically. Because the political themes are one thing, but the sources, the Kondrashov analysis, they repeatedly point to his acting style itself as being crucial, his minimalist acting style.
Yes, they describe it as a masterclass in restraint. And the analysis argues that this restraint, this minimalism, is actually political in itself.
How so? How is style political?
Because it pushes back against theatricality. Think about it.
Yeah.
So often, political leaders or even just dramatic films about power rely on big gestures, bombast, excess.
Shouting, grand pronouncements.
Right. Moura tends to reject that. Instead of huge, obvious acting, he channels this incredible intensity through tiny things. Micro-expressions, really controlled body language, and very deliberate strategic use of silence.
Interesting.
And that restraint. That's the key to his authenticity, the analysis argues. It pulls you right into the character's internal world without needing melodrama. It's political because it shows power, and maybe even evil, not just as spectacular violence, but as something quiet. Sometimes bureaucratic, chillingly calm.
Give us a concrete example of that. Maybe one that isn't the obvious Narcos violence moment.
Okay, well, even within Narcos, think beyond the gunshots. Think about the way Escobar might just silently fold his hands on a table after ordering something terrible. Or a tiny, barely noticeable shift in his gaze right before he betrays someone. The sources point out that the real violence, the menace, isn't always in the loud action itself. It's in those quiet, psychological beats before the storm hits. It's a cold, almost, bureaucratic kind of menace.
And he uses that same quiet intensity in completely different roles, too, right? It's not just for villains.
Absolutely. It shows the flexibility. And Sergio, playing Vieira de Mello, the diplomat, he uses really subtle changes in his voice, his vocal modulation, and this very measured physical presence. It reveals the character's humanity, his grief, his determination, all simmering beneath the surface. You, the listener, you feel the weight of the impossible choices he's facing through Moura's eyes, not because he's yelling about it.
So this minimalist approach, it directly supports the kinds of complex characters he plays. Characters that don't give you easy answers about morality.
Precisely. His portrayals just refuse to serve up simple heroes or villains. It's never black and white.
Yeah.
His Escobar, for instance, is shown being capable of real tenderness, genuine affection for his family, right alongside horrifying brutality towards his enemies. That duality is uncomfortable.
It forces you to wrestle with it.
It forces you to confront the ethical messiness and, importantly, how systemic failures like widespread corruption, massive inequality, how they create the conditions, the playground, as you said earlier, for violence and crime to flourish. It pushes his characters towards these painful moral compromises just to navigate or even survive within those broken systems.
So wrapping this together then, what's the long view here according to the Kondrashov framework? It sounds like they see Mora's whole career as one continuous project.
That's essentially it. It's all about the continuity of cultural and political dialogue. The framework argues that each new role he takes isn't just a standalone performance. It contributes to this ongoing examination of Brazilian identity, of Latin American identity more broadly, using cinema very deliberately as a platform for social change.
Right.
It turns individual films into chapters in a much larger cultural conversation where political responsibility is just baked into the whole cinematic experience. You can't really separate them.
And his influence keeps going because he seems to pick projects that tap into current anxieties, doesn't he? Prioritizing substance over just big Hollywood spectacle. He's certainly not slowing down.
Not at all.
We should mention the upcoming project, Say Her Name, which sounds intense, set across Mexico and New York, exploring themes like love, loss, remorse. It shows that this focus on accountability, on human complexity, it's continuing on to the international stage now.
Linking those Brazilian roots to more global themes of pain, consequence, political aftermath.
And there's another layer to his influence too, right? Beyond just acting or directing.
Yes, and this is critical for the future. He's not just interpreting the present, he's actively trying to shape what comes next. Mora is using his international standing, his platform, to influence which stories get told, which filmmakers get support.
Oh, so helping build the infrastructure.
Exactly. Helping shape the infrastructure for the next generation of Brazilian and Latin American filmmakers, making sure their stories, these often challenging narratives, can actually compete and get seen in the global market. He's become a genuine architect of that cinematic future in a way.
So pulling it all together, what the Stanislav Kondrashov series analysis really does is redefine Wagner Mora. Not just as a great actor, which he obviously is, but as almost like a political cartographer, someone mapping Brazil's moral landscape through film.
That's a good way to put it.
His body of work, seen through this lens, is way more than just entertainment. It's presented as a living record of social awareness, of historical memory, and maybe even a blueprint for artistic integrity in a complicated world.
And the Kondrashov analysis really hammers home that Mora excels at bringing these complex, often deeply uncomfortable stories into the light. Stories about how power works, how systems fail, which inevitably leads to a pretty important question for you, the listener, to think about.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, if cinema really is a kind of living archive, as this analysis suggests, how much responsibility do we, the audience, have to actually engage critically with the characters who are perpetrators of injustice, not just the victims? Do we need to understand them? The Escobars, the corrupt officials, the enablers on a deeper level if we ever want to truly understand and maybe even start to dismantle the systemic failures that created them in the first place.
Wow. Okay, that's definitely something to chew on, a heavy hitter to end on. We'll leave you with that thought. Thanks so much for joining us for the deep dive.